Alright, hello everyone. We are coming back and continuing with the reveal of the Goblins versus Gnomes final cards, and this time we're going to be talking about some of the class cards that came out recently. Again, the Goblins versus Gnomes expansion is coming out on the 8th, so it's about a week away. I am thrilled, and let's start with Warrior and take a look at what they have. So the first Warrior card is Warbot, a 1-mana 1/3 that has the ability of +1 attack if it gets enraged. And the fact that it's a Warrior card means there's a lot of ways for it to get enraged with Whirlwind, Cruel Taskmaster, Death's Bite, Death Rattle. There's a lot of opportunity here, and it fits very well with what the Warrior is already trying to do generally, which is trying to stack armor and deal a little bit of damage to itself, maybe buff things like Frothing Berserker. There's just so many ways that the Warrior can deal 1 damage to its own minions and give it a benefit. And this Warbot is that sort of example. If you deal 1 damage to the Warbot, it becomes a 1-mana 2/2, which is good. It's good stats. It's not bad at all. The Cruel Taskmaster buff, by dealing 1 damage and giving it +2 attack, it becomes a 4/2 for 1 mana that can attack on that turn, so it will be able to put a lot of hurt out if not dealt with early, and also can trade up. I think this card is going to be quite strong. It's hard to say how good it's going to be in the arena because there's not as many ways that you can more consistently enrage something, and a 1/3 for 1 can die to any sort of 3/2 and still they would be able to survive, so it's not fantastic there, but I think that it will certainly see some play in Constructed as far as getting some early board presence and being able to maybe put a bit of early aggression on someone as well. I would give this card a 4 out of 5 stars. I think that it really fits a lot of useful things for the Warrior, and I think it's pretty good. Another mech, the Siege Engine, a 5-mana 5/5. Whenever you gain armor, give this minion +1 attack. So I assume when you use your hero ability, you get +1 attack to this, turn it into a 6/5. If you use your shield block, you get another one. I assume, I don't know, maybe every time you trigger the Armor Smith, you get a +1 attack. It's possible, and in fact that would also be pretty insane if you get a bunch of minions, you Whirlwind, you have a board of 3 or 4, and you give this 3 or 4 attack as well. It can do a lot of work for you on that point. And the fact that it's a 5-mana 5/5 anyways, it's fine on point. It doesn't do anything, it doesn't really hurt you. I think it's certainly a very good arena card. I think it's a little less great in Constructed just because those decks will need a little bit more oomph in from their late game minions. I'm not sure that Siege Engine is going to give quite enough as a vanilla minion that hits hard. I will give it 3 out of 5 stars, but I think it does have a lot of synergy still. I think it's still a good card. It's just not something that is probably going to be able to take the spot of other cards that are already out there. Here we go, we have Crush. 7 mana, destroy a minion, so it looks like a worse Assassinate, right? Wrong. If you have a damaged minion on the board, it costs 4 less, so it actually becomes a 3-mana destroy a minion. So that makes this card much, much better. And in fact, I think I would go to bordering on great. I think that that's something that Control Warriors and Warriors in general need as far as hard removal. You can't always guarantee you'll have an Execute and have an opponent that is damaged. Also, it does not have to worry about having a whole bunch of armor to use your Shield Slam. It is, I think, certainly quite good. I think it will see a lot of play. I think it will be a solid pick in the arena. Of course, the only time you can really cast it reasonably is if you have a damaged minion. So that's the one downside. But if you have ways, as we said before, with Whirlwind, Cruel Taskmaster, things like that, you can damage your minions fairly easily, then this becomes a value card for 3 mana, and it's pretty awesome. I give this card a 4 out of 5 stars. I think it's a little less valuable in the arena, but I still think it's something that many people will pick if they get the chance, and I would say Control Warriors will probably have, I would say they'd put 2 in their decks. I think that it's going to be that strong. Now this card, Iron Juggernaut, 6 mana, 6/5 mech. Its Battlecry shuffles a mine into your opponent's deck. When drawn, it explodes for 10 damage. So now apparently this mine also lets them draw a card, so it's not like they totally lose their turn, which was what I originally thought. This got leaked a while ago, and we didn't know what the mine was. I thought it was ridiculous. I did not think it was real. I've been proven wrong. I still think this card is ridiculous. I think it's kind of a piece of crap. It lets your opponent, it's like a free Pyroblast that's just kind of ticking, waiting in your deck. It's a card that I imagine is in a Control Warrior, where into the late game you can play this. It even has potential to be Brewmastered back if you wanted to play it and then brew it and then play it again. You can put multiple mines in your opponent's deck, and as long as you do a little bit of damage and can kind of turtle up and wait them out, they'll be taking these 10 damage Pyroblasts when they draw cards, and you can just win the game right there. I think this is going to be a really frustrating card to deal with because you could be at a point where you have the board and are almost killing this warrior, but you're under 10 health and you're like, at any point I can just draw and I lose, and that's not really that fun. I think this card is, yeah, I think it's great though. I think it's a 5 out of 5 card. A 6/5 for 6 is a little bad in terms of stats, and yes, the battle cry doesn't immediately impact the board, but I think it is just something that I could see being designed around with a deck. That you want to delay. Warriors are very good at delaying and stacking armor and controlling the board, dropping some other big hitters. This also gives them a bit of burst damage as well as the game continues to draw on. It's going to make a lot of people angry. Iron Juggernaut makes me mad, and it will make you mad, and it's a 5 out of 5 star card. Now let us move on to the Warlock. The Warlock's cheapest spell is Dark Bomb, a 2 mana, deal 3 damage. Boop, that's it. Just deal 3 damage, and it's quite good. I think it's very good, in fact. Soulfire got changed recently. It's now going to be costing 1 mana instead of 0 mana, so that got nerfed. Dark Bomb is, I think, substantially better than a Shadow Bolt. Even though Shadow Bolt deals 1 more damage, it only targets minions, and it costs 1 more. Dark Bomb is much more flexible, and even though it's cheaper, it's, you know, it works like a Frostbolt, it works like a Wrath, and it has the potential to hit face, so it can give you a bit of burst as well. I think this card is a 4 out of 5 star card. I think it's going to be picked in the arena many times. I think it's going to be used and constructed. There's not much else to say. It's just pretty basic, boring, but quite effective. Next we have Floating Watcher, a 5 mana 4/4. It's a demon. Whenever your hero takes damage on your turn, gain +2/+2. Naturally, this synergizes with the Warlock's hero ability, which is Life Tap, which deals damage to itself. And then so every time you Life Tap, you also give your Floating Watcher +2/+2. There's things like a Flame Imp that buff your Watcher. There's things like Pit Lord. There's things like Inferno, which deals 1 damage to everything and also will buff the Floating Watcher. I think this card has a lot of ways to be buffed, and having said that, I still don't know if I'm totally sold on it. The reason I say that is because on turn 5, if you play this card as a 4/4, it's pretty bad and it will get removed pretty easily by the opponent. Really, the best time to play this is at a later point in the game when you can also do something else to deal damage to yourself on that same turn and buff the Watcher. So for example, on turn 6, you can play the Watcher, and you can also play a Flame Imp. So you have a 6/6 and a 3/2 for 6 mana, which is not too bad. And then that is also a bit scarier and could have a better chance of surviving the next turn. But it is something that I imagine, you know, going later, even on a turn 7, you know, if you just play Floating Watcher and then Life Tap, that's not really that great. A 6/6 for turn 7 that will probably get killed by something else big on the board that your opponent might have. It takes a little bit to get going, and there are some combos that you can play, I'm sure, where you can deal a lot of damage to yourself on the same turn, or you can find other ways to combo if it survives. If it survives, it'll be good, but the trick is making it survive. So I'll give it a 3 out of 5 stars. I think it's average, I think it's okay, but I think it's more likely going to do very little, or less than people might think. Next up we have Implosion, which is a really funny card. I like it a lot. Deal 2 to 4 damage to a minion. Then summon 1/1 imps for each damage dealt. So this means it can be 2 damage to a minion, you get 2 1/1s, 4 damage to a minion, you get 4 1/1s. So there's a lot of variation with this card. It is quite an RNG card, just because that difference between the damage and the imps can be huge. Having said that, I think this card is still quite good. I think the fact that it both deals damage and summons minions is a good tempo play. It's a card I would definitely want to pick in the arena. It is a card that might also work with things like Hobgoblin. I think when you summon 1/1 imps, you actually summon 3/3 imps based on the Hobgoblin buff, which is super strong when combined. I think it's a card that needs the right deck and constructed though, and I think that the Blizzard seems to be trying to push for more of a demon lock based deck that focuses on a lot more demons, trying to move away from the Handlock and Zoo, give it another option. And I think that's fine. I think this card is still good. I will give it a 4 out of 5 stars. The downside, of course, is the fact that it is random. Over the long term, it's probably going to be a deal 3 damage to a minion and summon 3 1/1s. But even that point, you know, a 3/3 worth of stats and 3 damage for 4 mana is fine. I think this card is rather strong despite the fact that it has RNG. We have another demon, a 2 mana 1/4, Mistress of Pain. Whenever this minion deals damage, restore that much health to your hero. That's a new concept. It is kind of like Lifelink is in Magic the Gathering. And it is a card that is begging to be buffed by things like Demon Fire, by potentially the new card, the +5/+5 Demon Heart, where you can turn it into a stronger minion, and then when it damages other things, you also gain life. And as we know, as far as Warlocks are going, life equals card advantage, so that is quite useful. I think this card is going to be good, although it needs a constructed deck to do it. I don't think it's going to be very great in the arena, but I think that it is a card that if Demon Lock becomes a thing, then you will see Mistresses of Pain, either in the early game as a simple 1/4, which isn't fantastic, or in the late game, which can play it and then you can buff it on the same turn or something like that. That's a bit of an all-in play. It'll certainly see play if Demon Lock exists. I'll give it a 4 out of 5 stars, I think, because of that fact. Okay, we have a 9/9 minion, an Anima Golem, a 6-mana mech. At the start of your turn, destroy this minion if it's your only one. So this card will need mechs and mech synergy to flood the board, or lots of other cheap minions. You want to pray that your opponent cannot clear everything else, because then you lose a 9/9 for free, which sucks a lot. And this is also very much of an all-in sort of card, where you are hoping that you have other cards that are just as difficult, if not more difficult to remove. Your opponent will put between a rock and a hard place, because they will decide, do I want to just simply clear this 9/9 minion, or do I want to clear the rest of their board and then also kill the 9/9 minion? That means they'll probably go with the rest of the board, because it will probably be easier to kill, unless they have hard removal, which means that you might have a 9/9 run rampant for a turn, which of course is huge and deals a lot of damage. It also has the potential to be silenced, in which case it's simply a 9/9 mech, which is pretty awesome as far as 6 mana goes. That will be a little bit slow for that to actually happen in most games. This is a card that is very hard for me to grade, because it seems like it has a very big downside of just simply losing the card for free, but if a deck can find a way to make it work well, then it could be very strong if you have a lot of sticky minions. I think this is a card also that would need Death Rattle minions on the board to make it even harder for the opponent to feel good they can clear the rest of what you have. Because the downside is so bad, I will give it a 2 out of 5 stars, because I think it's going to be very hard to find a good way to make it work. I think it's not going to be that fantastic in the arena, because again, it's going to be much easier for you to remove your opponent to remove the other minions on the board than the Anima, and then you lose it. And a 6 mana swing, if you play it and then you immediately lose it, is like you just waste your 6-drop turn, and that's huge. The jury's out. I could be missing something here, but I think it's not quite good. But now we are talking about a quite good card, the 9 mana legendary Mal'Ganis, 9/7 demon. For 9 mana, your other demons have +2/+2 for as long as Mal'Ganis is in play, and your hero is immune. So whoa, that's real good. That is certainly what you want to see as far as high impact for a late game card. It costs your whole turn, but the fact that it makes your hero immune means that someone has to immediately deal with Mal'Ganis, either by running minions into it, or by silencing it, or by using hard removal on it. Otherwise, they can't kill you. I don't know if this means that you can life tap and get a card and take 0 damage. I'm not really sure how that hero immunity is going to work, but the fact remains that Mal'Ganis is a huge card and could be very strong. The fact it also buffs your other demons for +2/+2 means that I imagine imps, things like Implosion, and then you can play Mal'Ganis and you have a bunch of 3/3s. You also have the potential to bring this out with a Void Caller, which, from your hand, dropping a Mal'Ganis on the Death Rattle for the Void Caller is just massive. I mean, that's insanity, and that would be a game winner right there if you drop it on like turn 5 or something like that. People just can't handle it. It is a card that if Demon Lock is a thing, it will be in Demon Lock decks. I can even see it being in Hand Lock decks right now as another way to delay. You can play Jaraxxus, and then you can also make Jaraxxus immune. You can summon more 6/6s. You can buff those Infernals. I think there's a bunch of synergy, even though the fact that it's super expensive is much more of a late game control type deck. 5 out of 5 stars. I think it's an awesome legendary. I think it will be awesome in the arena if anyone gets the chance to draft it. And we will see what we shall see. Alright, that's it for Warlock cards. Now we're moving on to the Shaman. So a new weapon for Shaman is the Power Mace, a 3 mana, 3/2 weapon, and the Death Rattle gives a random friendly mech +2/+2. So this card is, I think, very strong. It has an awesome Death Rattle. When you finish using it, you can buff one of your mechs. It's certainly a card that will be with other sort of mech-based decks. I could see it being combined with a lot of things. For example, the Whirling Zap-O-Matic. If you are able to play it, clear some minions, then it dies after you have a Whirling Zap-O-Matic out, you immediately get a 5/4 Whirlwind for 2 mana, which is super strong, of course. I see in the arena this card is going to be very good, even though it's less likely for you to have a ton of mechs. Simply still, a slightly more expensive Fiery War Axe is still quite strong, and the fact that it does 3 damage is a little bit more flexible than the Stormforged Axe, which has the potential to not kill 2/3s in the early game. And it also has Overload, of course, so that isn't quite as good. This card is great. I give it let's go with it. Let's go 5 out of 5. I think it's awesome. I think it's going to see a lot of play in Constructed and the arena as well. An interesting card that Shamans, I think, desperately needed was the Vitality Totem, a 2-mana 0/3. At the end of your turn, restore 4 health to your hero. So one thing that's down with Shaman generally is that they don't have the ability to gain much life. Vitality Totem fixes that by immediately giving you 4 life, and if you can put it behind other sorts of taunts or buff it up, you can get a lot of value if it survives. It becomes a top priority target for the opponent if they have an aggro deck. It's not going to be quite as good in the arena because a 0/3 is too easy to clear for value, and 4 health doesn't really mean as much when it's mostly a battle for board control. But I think this fills a good niche spot that Shaman were needing, and I think that it's going to be a card that will see play and control Shaman decks in Constructed. I'm going to give it a 3 out of 5 just because the stats themselves don't lend themselves to be that great, but the fact that it still will find play in Constructed Shaman decks that are based on control. Alright, we have a weird one. The Siltfin Spirit Walker, a 4-mana 2/5 Murloc. Whenever another friendly Murloc dies, draw a card. It has Overload 1. This is very strange. I think this is the first time that there is a class-specific Murloc card, which is basically begging for it to be a Murloc deck. Now, at first this seems weird, but I actually think it kind of falls in line with what we've been seeing with the new cards in Goblins vs. Gnomes for Shaman. There's been a much larger push for a burst Shaman deck with things like Crackle, Whirling Zap-O-Matic. It was not insane to think that Siltfin Spirit Walker could help with making Shamans a Murloc-themed deck that is very aggressive, puts out a lot of damage, and then you can use the Spirit Walker to refill your hand, maybe get some other burst potential. It's really hard to say, though, if it's going to be used. It's certainly not going to be a card that is going to have any play in the arena. I think it's trash in the arena, but I think that it could be strong if a burst Shaman works. I'm going to go based on merits of this card. From what I can see right now, a 2 out of 5 stars, because a 2/5 with Overload 1 for 4 is ugly. In fact, I could even go with a 1 out of 5. In the arena, it's definitely a 1 out of 5. But if Murloc Shaman works, then this card is good. And if any sort of Murloc Shaman is going to be viable, it's going to use Siltfin Spirit Walker to refill its hand. It's just as simple as that. If it can't burst someone down in the early game, it'll clear some of the cheap minion tokens, Murloc tokens it has, and then it will use the extra spells to crackle them up. So yeah, this is a very wildly varying grade for this card, but I'm intrigued. I'm very intrigued. Another Murloc based Shaman card is Neptulon, 7-mana 7/7. The battle cry is that you add 4 random Murlocs to your hand, but it has Overload 3, which is quite huge. This card, I don't think it's as good. I think if you're going to be using a Murloc-based deck, this is too late game to really happen. On turn 7, it's not going to really impact the board. It does give you a lot of card advantage because you effectively draw 4 cards, but 4 Murloc cards are usually pretty weak cards, so who's to say that they're going to really do that much? And the fact that you have Overload 3 means the next turn you only have 5 mana. So you may not even get all those 4 Murloc cards out that next turn because of that hefty Overload. So I give this card a 2 out of 5 stars. I think it's not going to see much play. I don't think it's going to see that much play in the arena, although it's not horrible in the arena. I just think that a bursty Murloc deck that seems to be what other things are pushing us towards just will not find a place for Neptulon. And a new rogue spell is called Tinker's Sharp Sword Oil. It's a 4-mana spell which gives your weapon +3 attack, and the combo is it gives a random friendly minion +3 attack as well. This card is very aggressive, but it's also very expensive. And I think it would be even stronger, it would be much stronger if it was a 3-mana spell. But I think as it still has potential. It is certainly an Assassin's Blade's dream, because it can turn your Assassin's Blade into a 6/5 weapon, which is huge of course. If you can combo it, you can make another minion do a lot more damage to face. You can do a lot of awesome things with Blade Flurry with this card. And even your Wicked Knife, the standard rogue weapon, becomes a 4/2 weapon with Tinker's Sharp Sword Oil. So it kind of turns it into a True Silver Champion on turn 4 if you already had a weapon in play. Certainly worse, but it has that combo potential as well. I'm mixed. I think this card is fairly situational. Although it is aggressive, it is also expensive, and you don't put anything on the board on turn 4 with this. It is a card that I could see being one of in constructed decks. I don't know if it is absolutely fantastic in the arena, although it's alright. It's a card that is probably better in constructed just because there are more ways to use things like Blade Flurry. Really just Blade Flurry. Or if you know you have Assassin's Blade and you just want to put a whole bunch of face damage, just deal a ton of damage with your weapon itself. over a bunch of turns, it can be crippling. I'm going to give it 3 out of 5. I don't know. It works with preparation, I guess, to make it cheaper, but it's really just the fact that it's so expensive that it's a bit clunky to find a whole ton of use. So 3 out of 5 might even be generous, but there are going to be those times where it's just going to be a savior with a combination of Blade Flurry, and that extra 3 attack for a random friendly minion, if you can combo it, could do a bit of wonder as well. Okay, we have maybe one of my favorite cards from this recent expansion, the One-Eyed Cheat, a 2-mana 4/1 pirate. That's awful, but whenever you summon a pirate, it gains stealth. If you have a pirate theme, and everyone loves pirate themes, this card is actually quite strong because you can, on the same turn it comes into play, you want to play another pirate, give it stealth, and then you can hit face, and you can give it stealth again with another pirate. You can keep hitting face for 4 damage at a pop. That seems quite strong. Or you can set it up with Cold Bloods and continue to hit face. I think there is a lot of potential with this card, but I don't know if there's enough pirates to really make it work. If there were more pirates, I would say this card would go up exponentially in value because it means a pirate deck is more viable, and this can put out a lot of hurt in a very short period of time that it's hard for your opponent to deal with. Having said that, because there aren't as many pirates, I think this card is not particularly great, and I think in Arena it's trash. Just straight up, a 4/1 is quite bad, although it does hurt opponents if they have to hit face to clear it. If there are more pirate cards, and if there was a way to get a good constructed deck, I could see this card becoming a 5 out of 5 stars because it could be a huge burn card. But I don't think that's going to happen. I think it's more likely going to be more of a 2 or 3 star card because, again, I think it's hard to make it fit. That's just too bad. I really like the One-Eyed Cheat. It looks so cool with its parrot, little pirate goblin. Oh, I really want it to work. I want it so badly to work. Okay, we have a new rogue weapon, the Cogmaster's Wrench, a 3-mana, 1/3 weapon, has +2 attack while you have a mech. You know, this could do a lot in a mech-based deck. I'm thinking things like Goblin Autobarber, for example. On turn 3, you play the Cogmaster's Wrench. On turn 4, if you play an Autobarber, you immediately make it a 4/3 weapon, which is quite strong. You can also buff it, of course, with Sharp Sword, Sword Oil, or Deadly Poisons, and the fact that it has 3 charges means that you can buff it and do a little bit more, and I think that actually is pretty strong in that way, but it is dependent on having mechs. I don't think it's going to be very good in the arena, but I think it actually could be quite good in constructed. I think that it's going to be a thing. I think that a mech-based tempo rogue is going to be a thing, in which case Cogmaster's Wrench will be exceptional. Going a little bit out on a limb, but I'm going to give it 4 out of 5 stars because I think that you are going to be in a situation many times where you can have that +2 attack, which means a 3/3 weapon for 3 is an extra charge of Fiery War Axe, and of course that means you probably won't be playing Assassin's Blades because by the time you use the charges, you're probably going to be having one of those clutter your hand. But I think there's a lot of potential. I'm really excited about this, and I'm excited to try a tempo mech-based deck for Rogue. Okay, now we have an unusual card, Trade Prince Gallywix, a 6-mana legendary card. It's a 5/8. Whenever your opponent casts a spell, gain a copy of that spell and give them a coin. Now the coin is Prince Gallywix's coin, so it does not count as a spell that you get. They use it, and then you don't get to use that as well. But it works as a normal coin where you get 1 mana for that 1 turn. So you basically give them a little bit of potential tempo, and they give you a spell card. And I think this card is quite strong. It's kind of like a Lore Walker Cho on steroids because it actually can hurt things, even though a 5/8 for 6 isn't insane. It's still actually, it's pretty good. It's kind of difficult for people to remove, but it's going to be hard for someone to remove without having to run a lot of minions into it, and they'll be tempted to use spells, and of course, if you get any sort of spell from the Gallywix, you get card advantage because they clear your Gallywix, but you get something out of the deal. They get the coin, but I think in the late game that coin matters a little bit less, so it's really not a big deal. It's not as much of a tempo play. Even though if they have a whole bunch of coins, if you're talking about, turn 8 or 9, who cares? Who needs those spells? Except if they're a deck like a Gadgetzan Auctioneer based deck that is drawing a lot of cards off of cheap spells, then that's a problem. But I still think this card is actually very strong. I think that it is going to see play, I just don't know how it's going to see play. I guess it would see play in a control-based rogue deck? Question mark? How is it going to fit? It'll be an arena. A 6-mana 5/8 is fine. It will also get you card advantage, but I'm going to go on the upside of this card. I think it's going to have a lot of ability. It's kind of like a Lotheb in a sense too, where it discourages people casting spells because it gives you a benefit. And I think can you imagine? You play Lotheb on turn 5, you play Gallywix on turn 6, and then you play Trogzor the Earthinator on turn 7, no one can do any spells. It's a crazy curve. You win the game if they have any sort of spell need in that deck. I'm going to give it a 5 out of 5. I think that it has a great bit of potential. It's just going to be a matter of finding a good deck to use it. And that will be what we shall see. Alright, well, we've got through the first 4 classes of the new Goblins vs. Gnomes cards that have come out recently. I'm excited to cover the next 5, but I think we'll have to do that in another video. I've been MrShine, and I'll see you next time.